So, you got yourself some roses for Valentine's Day. Now what do you do with them? My name is Kate. I'm from Kate's Garden, and I want to show you some tips and techniques to ensure that your roses last for at least 10 days. The first thing you have to do, of course, is make certain that you follow the fundamentals of care for roses and almost any other flower. And that's basically by conditioning them properly. And in order to condition a rose properly, that means you're doing some basic care. The first thing, of course, is to do what's called the fundamental cut, and that's a slanted cut. Typically you would do it underwater, but for this YouTube video's sake, I'm just going to show you the slanted cut so that you can see you're doing a deeply slanted cut. Now you're going to notice that I'm not actually stripping away any of the thorns. We don't do that unless it's for bouquet work. I actually like the look of the thorns in the vase because I think it's a fundamental of the beauty of the rose. The next step is to defoliate as much as possible. If you're showing off the foliage in a long stem vase, you'll keep some of the upper leaves, but I always think of the foliage as, I want to say a bit of an enemy to keeping the beauty of the floral head intact. You're also going to do what's called jacketing. That means you're going to take away a few of the petals that have been damaged in transport. So you're going to defoliate, you're going to give that slanted cut, and you're going to jacket. And you're going to make certain that the rose gets back into water as quickly as possible. Now this is actually floral water, so that means it's lukewarm water with floral food. The floral food is basically, it's kind of like the chemical equivalent of bleach and sugar, so that the bleach keeps the water clean and the sugar keeps the head fed. Now one of the difficulties, of course, for roses is that they have a very, very big head on a very woody stem. So it's tough to keep the rose hydrated. And a lot of them suffer from droop. And that's basically just a fundamental airlock in the top of just underneath the head of the rose. Now, if that does happen to you, it doesn't mean that you should throw out the rose. It means that you should deeply submerge the rose, the whole thing, in lukewarm water for about 20 minutes, and it will revive. So we're going to assume that you've done the traditional classic look of roses with baby's breath and leather leaf in a big vase. And they've lasted 2 or 3 days, and then they start to open and they start to droop a little bit. So what should you do to make them last longer? The biggest thing, of course, is to understand that to make flowers of any type last longer, you have to change the water in your vase every couple of days with lukewarm water, because lukewarm water oxygenates the floral head the most effectively. And you have to replenish the food, all right? New cleanser, new sugar, keep the roses happy and healthy. And the real trick with roses is to shorten the roses. It's just fundamental, all right? The shorter the stem, the less distance the rose has to make up to the floral head. So as the bouquet ages over a few days, you basically shorten and shorten and shorten. Now initially you could just use stones in the bottom of your vase to compensate for the loss of height in your vase. But you could also just use different types of vases to shorten your roses. So here's a great idea right here. This is a very, very trendy look in 2018 to use big, beautiful Italian ruscus, this nice branchy look in a very simple application. We've just taken 4 of the roses and staggered them at 4 different heights with a simple background of Italian ruscus in a nice big bottle vase to give a totally different look. Looks great in front of a front foyer mirror or on a counter, a sideboard. Very, very nice look. Another idea is to just use a mason jar. So mason jars are a trend that is holding. In other words, they've been very popular for 3 or 4 years now. They continue to be really popular. And of course, we've added our own little birch log, a little disc, just to give the love symbol. And now I'm just going to take some of those roses. I'm going to shorten them a little further. I'm going to spiral them. And in order to spiral, I basically am using a classic hand-tied approach where I've really relaxed my shoulders. I breathe out and I make certain that I'm just holding the flowers a few inches below the floral head, and I'm going to create a little spiral by putting each rose one in after the other so that I get a nice little spiraled look. I hold them nice and loose so that I can turn my work as I go, and I fill in this nice little spiral. And of course, each time I'm making certain that the flowers, one circle after another, are slightly lower, so I create a nice little dome. So I get a beautiful little spiraled look like this. And then I'm just going to collar it with these pretty little salal tips. This is a very long-lasting florist green. Tuck them under so it's like a cute little collar underneath the roses. Make that look nice and full. And you'll notice that it is indeed collared underneath the roses. And then I can just basically retrim those stems. Really important to retrim them so they've got that newly cut, slanted cut, so that there's better water uptake, all even at the same length, and just pop them into my vase. And I've got a nice little look that's going to last days longer. Okay, step 2 basically. So first of all, we reduce the roses so that we've got some the first cut, and now we're going a couple days later in the life of the rose, so we have to cut them even shorter. So again, that just means taking the rose, giving it that slanted cut so that it takes water effectively up again through the stem. Change the water so that you're using the lukewarm water and floral food. And you're just reducing the height. So some of these are taller. Obviously, we have some that are taller in the back row and slightly shorter in the front, just to give a nice, simple application that would look great on a kitchen table, for instance. If you want something that still has enough of a formality for a dining room table, think about digging out those cocktail glasses that you might have sitting in the china cabinet or in the bar, and just do a simple little arrangement like this. It's actually just done in a pie plate with some floral foam. You can see the floral foam peeking through here. And we've just taken some of the greens that came with the flower arrangement. So there's some pretty little tiki fern, there's variegated pit, there's a little bit of seeded eucalyptus in through here, and of course the baby's breath that is considered so classic for Valentine flower arranging. And we've just done a nice little domed arrangement that sits cute as a button in a cocktail glass. I mentioned a moment ago the latest trend in flower arranging, which is called Dutch Master. Now this is not a typical Dutch Master because we've only used one type of flower, but we wanted to use this technique to show how to make the Valentine roses last days and days longer. So with the Dutch Master look, the Dutch Master look is a very freeing way to flower arrange. All that you really require is some sort of pedestaled vase. This one is actually we're using floral foam. You can use chicken wire as well as the grid in which to place the flowers. And we've used all the typical types of foliage that one finds in Valentine arranging. This is parvifoglia. There's some seeded eucalyptus in here. We've used some variegated pit. And of course, we've used the baby's breath as the filler flower. And we've just taken the roses, shortened them significantly so that they're only a few inches long, and placed them in a low plantscape, flowerscape, throughout this asymmetrical Dutch Master arrangement. Okay, so now we're down to the last couple of days of the rose's life. Here we've cheated a little bit just to show off a beautiful pink rose. We think that's important because it's kind of fun to know what each rose means in the language of flowers. Pink means grace and beauty. A red rose means love triumphant, as they say. And Yellow roses mean friendship. Each rose, coral roses mean desire. Each rose has an emotional meaning in the language of flowers. In any case, coming back to the last couple of days of the life of the rose, using this really shortened approach where it's really just down to a couple of inches, again, back in floral foam or lots of lukewarm water with floral food, you're putting it into a nice little domed application with a cashpo and the foliage that we've mentioned before. This also has a beautiful little freesia in it, some nice pretty wax flowers, a fuzzy dianthus, just to make it a beautiful, we call this a bundled small. This is great, a great idea, by the way, to give as a hostess gift. And of course, we always try to add some little fun element in it, like this sweet little bird, just to remind you that spring is coming.